Hi everyone, it's Monday night, 9 o'clock. You're watching Use It or Lose It, our rugby show that has a look at all the hot talking points in the sport and also the build-up to the Rugby World Cup final that's, of course, taking place later this year. Well, we've got three guests on the show tonight. We're going to be talking about a couple of hot topics that are taking place in rugby. Before you do anything, though, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, you're watching for the first time, go below the video and hit the subscribe button. You'll get notified of all of our videos. So what are we going to cover on tonight's show? Well, we're going to answer the question or discuss the question, is South Africa the Brazil of rugby? That, of course, has got to do with the exodus of players heading north at the moment. I think there was a tweet, we'll have a look at it, something like 40 out of the 100 contracted players have signed contracts to head up north. So we'll have a look at that. We'll also discuss the Stormers' decision to take the 3 points for the 19-all draw against the Crusaders. Lots of debate about that on Twitter. And we'll have a look at the 9 and 10 jerseys heading to the World Cup. And there's another topic that's also been quite hot on Twitter, and that is the, what was deemed to be a forward pass in the Stormers-Crusaders match. There's been quite a bit of debate on that, so we'll discuss that as well. But let me start by introducing the panel. And I'm going to start down in Stellenbosch with Tyler. Now, unfortunately, Tyler's camera's not working, so Tyler Masutu, his first appearance on the show. We're not going to be able to see his face. We can only see his profile pic. But Tyler, welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
How's it, everyone? I'll hopefully next time you'll be able to see my beautiful face, but not at this moment.
Excellent, Tyler. I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and you're very active with your rugby tweets. You must be excited for the World Cup, eh?
Yeah, I think excited, but also very much sort of intrigued. I think this will be the most competitive World Cup in a long time. I don't think it'll be a clear story for New Zealand, and I think we actually we could go really well or could go really badly.
Yeah, that's it. It could certainly go either way. Let's go down. Also down in Cape Town, we've got Sean, Judge Rugby on Twitter. Judge, good to have you on the show. I see you've been active as ever on Twitter.
Yeah, how's it? It's good to be back. Yeah, this weekend there was a lot to talk about, and it's still simmering a little bit, so it's going to be a good show, I reckon.
Yeah, well, lots of hot topics. And down there in George, we got Couch Critic. Couch, let's start by asking, did you make any money? Did you follow me on Brooks Koepka in the golf? I was all over him.
How's it, Brent? Yes, thanks. It was a good sporting weekend. And yes, I did have a few loose cents on him. But I must say, I wish I had more faith in your punting abilities there.
Yeah, well, I've actually had a pretty good golf run. I backed Tiger Woods and now backed Brooks Koepka, and my second choice was Johnson, so pretty good that. But let's get back to the rugby. And guys, I just want to, I'm not going to share my screen now, but I'm just going to go and have a look at the tweet. There was a tweet from John Alberts at Jumbo Gene on Twitter, and he says 40 of the current 100-odd players in the 4 franchises locally have signed overseas contracts for the next year. And he says a few other things, but he basically says there, rest in peace, South African rugby. And Sean, let me start with you. There is a massive exodus to Europe, and I mean, I think this week, every day there's been an announcement, or in the last week, of players going over. How big a problem is this for South African rugby? Is there something we should be doing about it? What are your thoughts on that?
It's the season for all those announcements and all those. It's a time period in the season for that to happen, but also coming towards the end of a World Cup cycle, it's going to escalate a little bit more than usual. In terms of the percentage of guys leaving versus what we normally have, I'm not sure how much more, but it does seem to be a lot more. And the problem and the most concerning thing is we're losing a lot of guys quite early on in their career, where in the past we were losing a lot of guys late on in their career, which was keeping our rugby relatively strong. So we're starting to have a younger user sort of playing field at the moment, which is a bit of a concern. Having said that, though, there's only so many players the guys can have overseas. So we will see a couple of guys coming back, even if they're on the wrong side of their career, just to help balance things out a little bit.
Right, let's go to you now, Tyler. I'm just going to unmute you there because it's a bit of background noise. And Tyler, what are your thoughts on that? Should we be hell of a concerned about this exodus, or is it something we can work with? I mean, I saw a tweet there that says basically we can be the Brazil of rugby. Brazil don't have any players really playing locally, but they're pretty much a world force in football. Can we say the same in rugby, or is it something we should be really worried about?
I think I'm caught sort of between two places with that. I think on one side, the Brazil analogy is actually quite accurate. We are going to be now exporting all these players all around the world, and they are clearly doing super well in all of these competitions. I mean, Paf de Klerk and Kobus Reinach are two of the best players in the Premiership, and Ches and Colby is doing amazingly in Europe as well. So that's good. And I mean, they're coming back sometimes, mostly sort of in good condition for the Springboks. But on the other hand, it does hamper our Super Rugby teams a lot. But I think it's inevitable as well. I mean, the rand is so much more weaker than the pound and the euro and the yen. So, and probably the US dollar now with the Major League Rugby as well. So I think it's now just working around it and sort of like what New Zealand's doing, like just not necessarily saying that we only picking local players, but I think we have to work around that. So maybe someone like a Pollard or like a Jesse Creel, if they leave, say to them, okay, leave for a year or two, earn your money, we'll still give you an SA contract, but please come back and, we're going to bump up your salary or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think the economics style is a good factor. And I see Gerard van Tonders in the live chat, and he made that point up front. He said, you've got to look at the economics of it. And looking at that Twitter thread that we had to look at, a lot of guys were just making that point. And I think it was Front Row Grunt who was saying, people are looking to get out of the country, and this is offering them an opportunity. And it leads into what Sean said as well, though. In the past, it was your guy who would go out there for the last 2 years of his career and earn a nice fat payday. But you're getting guys going younger and younger. And I guess, for me, the danger is if the guys are targeted so young that they actually go across and potentially will choose to play for another country rather than the Springboks.
Yeah, look, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. We have many examples all around Europe now of players choosing to play for other European teams. And, I think we would all love to have CJ Stander, for example, in our loose forward mix and everything like that. But that's another problem, the young players being lost. I think that's also sort of partly our rugby structures not sort of getting these young players in at the right time. So partly it's talent identification, some of them being lost because they're not being identified by the unions early enough. I mean, CJ Stander's situation was, he was told he was too small and he went away, so he's not getting selected. And then obviously a lot of them, and that's the concern, I think that Sean also said as well, like we're losing a lot of sort of first choice players that are young and would seem to be like sort of pretty close to box standard or about to be sort of picked by the box. So someone like Handel Liebenberg, I mean, he's not going to make the World Cup squad, I think, but he's someone that maybe from 2020 onwards, you'd be like, he's going to be in the mix. But I mean, us and New Zealand and Australia to an extent are having the same problem.
That's it. And Couch, just to bring you in here, I mean, it's not a problem unique to South Africa. The New Zealand and, as Tyler said, the New Zealand and Australia are having the same problem. But it's also probably fair to say that the problem seems to be bigger for us. And that's probably got a lot of reasons to do with the economy and perhaps just the general state of the country. In that, as it was stated, people are looking for a way out. And if you're a promising young rugby player and you get an offer to go overseas, it's very, very difficult to turn down, both from a monetary but also potentially an immigration point of view. You may want to settle down and keep your options open.
Yes, Brent, as you say, it's a bigger factor for us due to the rand. So that plays a big role, but it's also not isolated just to us. I mean, Fiji and Samoa and those countries have experienced it quite often. The player drain, it's very real for them, and I mean it's actually been to the detriment of their rugby, and something similar could happen to South Africa. So I think it is a real threat, and as Tala has also said, and Sean, it's there are pros and cons to it. It's like a Steven Kitsoff coming back. He came with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that he could come and plow back, and his levels were up. But at the same time, you have to say, is it really such a benefit for us having a Francois Hougaard, a Kobus Reinach that side, when they could have been playing in Super Rugby and at least testing themselves at those level against some of the other players that we have in the reckoning? And the same is for Pollard. You got to weigh up, is it the 3 years that he's going to get there under different coaching in a different environment going to be better for him than playing in South Africa? And in that case, I'd say it's probably probably a good thing. But as you said, I've said the same thing about AB de Villiers and some of the cricketers. There's absolutely nothing you can hold against these guys. I think South Africa and rugby in general has been far behind in terms of the commercial aspect of sport and the business of sport. And I mean, I personally think it's probably just in the long run, we're going to see the end of internationals being the big calling shot. You've already seen in cricket T20s in the IPL coming through and those kind of leagues. And I'm pretty sure, obviously, in football, it's completely that way, where the clubs decide things and decide the paycheck, and internationals are just seen as secondary. And I think rugby is pretty much doing a tightrope there. And that's probably the problem with these overseas teams. It's short term. It's great, Saracens and Sale Sharks and London Irish bringing in a host of South Africans, and it's pretty good for people around them. But eventually, it's going to be bad for international rugby if South Africa sticks to the concept with New Zealand and Australia and Argentina, but not playing these guys who are there, and then all of a sudden, the Southern Hemisphere rugby could really drop off, and then it's just not as good a contest, and people are going to buy Saracens jerseys instead of Springbok jerseys.
Right, and Sean, let me bring you in here, because I was going to ask the question as well. Should we, in your opinion, be selecting players that are playing overseas? I mean, I know at one stage it was a no-no. You went over there, you were effectively ending your international career, at least until you came back. And I think, probably the coaches have had to have another look at that situation because of the sheer numbers going over there. What is your feeling? I mean, should we be stopping players, trying to stop players from going over there? Or is there anything we can do to stop the players, or is it rather a question of let's rather accept that it's going to happen and live with it as best as possible?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The truth is, if you look at where the Springboks are selected from within South Africa, there's 4 unions, because we are not picking books from the Cheetahs or from the Kings anymore, it seems, not for 2 to 3 seasons now almost. So we've got 4 unions, and there's only so many guys that they can contract. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, when we selected Colby, and we absolutely should have selected him, I have no doubt about it. But once we selected him, he was essentially our first player to be capped, make his debut outside, who was based outside of the country. Stephen Kitsoff, slight technicality because he'd already signed to come back to the Stormers when he made his debut. He was at Bordeaux, but he was moving back, so that was kind of how I think that was sorted out. But now that we have made once now we've opened the floodgates. Now the guys are not. There's no reason for them to stay here, and the Springbok and the need to play for the book is not that strong anymore, because it's not really sustainable here. If you're on the fringes anymore, you'd rather go overseas and play in the Pro D2 or the Championship. If you can't make a first league, the guys are earning so much more playing in the French Pro D2 or the English Championship. So the truth is, it's really challenging at the moment. I think it's done now. I think we do need to select players overseas. I think if we're going to hand out debuts for guys that are based overseas, it needs to be some really strict guidelines, a really hard conversation, and a big sell by Rassie to do it. It's got to be a case of Kitsoff, we desperately need you, but you come back. If they can have that conversation with other guys, if they do it, I'm happy. However, if we get to the point where we see, also what we do is we kind of, it's a very negative way of looking at it, but we can also cap guys to keep them for us, and we can start growing our base a little bit and having bigger squads to select from. Because there's also going to be guys that have played overseas for 3, 4, 5 years that are eligible to play for someone else that potentially could say no to the Springboks if it's a one cap option. Where, it's a tough one. It's difficult, but I don't have a problem now. I just think we need to manage it properly. I don't think it needs to be a go hell for leather and cap as many guys as possible.
Tyler, so seems to be a general acceptance that the horse is sort of bolted here.
Yeah.
What would you do now? I mean, what do you think the future is? Should we be encouraging it almost to try and become that Brazil of rugby? Or do we try and really stick to picking mainly local players or players that have at least come back to play?
Yeah. I think just quickly, I think a point that Hein made that I find interesting is sort of what does this mean for the future of rugby? So are we going to be more sort of club-based than international based? And I think that's quite an interesting question. I still think that the international game is still strong enough to sort of sustain itself, number one, and that hopefully the World Rugby sort of makes the right decisions in terms of the Nations Cup and sort of incentivizing that. But I also do think that, it's sort of that the rugby unions overseas are going to start sort of trying to hopefully clamp down on the leagues over there, because I mean the French rugby union is as weak as it's ever been in the last 10 years, and they're still buying players like nobody's business. But to your question, I think I agree with Sean. The horse has bolted. It's now, and I mean, I think early in the year they announced the new sort of contracting structure of contracting more players for South Africa. That's, I think, positive. I think it's now sort of working with players and saying, sort of like with what the All Blacks did with Sam Whitelock, to say, we'll contract you for the next 4 years, go overseas, go have 6 months in Japan, or go have a year or two in Europe, earn as much money as you can, because, I mean, players have to maximize their earning ability, and we have to understand that now. Like, everyone needs to get paid. But go for 2 years and try to get them back as soon as possible. I think maybe, and that's sort of what the new contracting model is trying to do, maybe, have, like, let's say, 75 players that we're sort of looking at for the next 3 or 4 years. And sort of work on a case-by-case basis and say, look, if you can sign like maximum 2-year contract and try to be back for like a World Cup year. If you leave for longer, you forfeit the opportunity, stuff like that. I think that's going to be now the angle that we have to go with, looking at the player drain.
Couch, any more thoughts on your side there? I just want to mention one player, the name of France. Franz Steyn was really the guy that really started it all. I think after the 2007 World Cup, he went over as a youngster. We haven't really had a lot of youngsters go over up until that point, and he's really made a big career of it over there. I mean, do you think a lot of guys are going to follow that route?
Brent, I just want to get back to that. What Tala said is spot on. Is I think the way to go pretty much. I think they should put some kind of cap in. I know we talked about a number of test caps being 30 and those kind of things. I think you've got to consider the phase you're in. I think this is a new phase, and for 2-3 years they should actually clamp it down completely and say, listen, we're not going to take you on board, or they should have said that in advance. I think that's important. And just quickly want to jump back to what Sean said. And I think that was with that criteria they had about your second best team or your second national team being where you have to be capped. So I think that's important. If the IRB or World Rugby go back to your under 20s and then rather focus on getting these youngsters capped at under 20 to at least try and mitigate those issues where the guys just go over at a young age to try and play internationally. So I mean that's where your scouting and things like that really has to be spot on, so you can cap them under 20 and at least know they're in the system and you're taking that issue out. But then again, as Tala said, I think the Rassie thing is beautiful. The concept he has, obviously how it's going to work is that's like the devil's in the detail. But I think that's the way to go. I think you've got to go to a tier kind of setup. They should have sat there and said, listen, 10-man brains trust. We're going to have 5 guys who are elites. We're going to have Andre Pollard, Eben, Pieter Steff, Sia, and Malcolm Marx, and say, listen, we're going to give you top dollar. We're going to give you 3 million a year from South Africa, and we're going to negotiate with the provinces to give you additional 2. We're going to try and get some sponsors on board. That these guys are looking at like 6-7 million deal, and included in that in the 4 years is we're either going to give you a 1-year sabbatical to go play for whoever, or help you set up a Japan contract for 2 years, meaning that you can still play Super Rugby. And I think that's the way it should work. Put more effort into the top guys and then start chipping that down as far as you go, and at least make sure that you've got those semi-youngsters who already have the experience, the spine that we talk about, and make sure those guys are still on board, but at the same time have an opportunity to maybe pick up a little bit of experience, for that 1-year sabbatical as New Zealand does it, or at least fill the coffers in Japan. And I mean, it's also good for Pieter Steff the toy for the toll on the body to rather go play 2 years of Japan rugby, because I mean it is still a little bit less contact, a little bit less physical than some of the other things you can do. So to me, that's the kind of approach, and I think it's a real hands-on approach. And obviously the coffers are only that big, and then then you can make your per game fee much higher for those guys who fall outside, let's say the 30 that you get to from the drop down tier until you don't really have much cash left. So you can still have some youngsters around and say, listen, okay, but if we do cap you, you're getting 100K a game or something like that. So at least also keep them involved. And obviously a lot of emphasis has to go on the provinces to, again, where we've fallen behind is get those commercial sponsors on board with these guys. I think the Sharks did it well, and his agents and stuff with Beast, he did a lot of stuff on the side to at least, boost his contract and make sure he stays. And I think that needs to happen across the board quite often. And then I just want to say, if you look at the South Sharks team now, I mean, you guys said we hopefully need to start getting a cap on some of the overseas guys, but I mean, they've got Akker van der Merwe now, Koenie Oosthuizen, Lotte Jager, both Dupree twins. That's 5 in the 8 at the front, and then they've got Faf de Klerk, Robert Dupree, and Ruan Jansen van Rensburg. I mean, that's 8 South Africans that could run on in a team. So I mean, surely there's got to be saturation that's got to be reached and said, listen, you wrecking the dam under the ear there.
That's it. Sean, just to bring you in on the capping side, because you raised that issue about potentially capping players and that way effectively preventing them playing from anyone else. Do you think there's a bit of a moral issue around that as well? I mean, if you're capping a guy just to sort of keep him there for possible use in the future?
Yeah, like I said, it's a bit of a negative process. I think and the way that I put it forward is quite a negative space, but I think something that maybe might tie it in together is the pathway. So once we start, I think what Rusty's done is he's looking ahead and seeing where the problem lies, and he's trying to now sort of stop herding cats and try and get them all together properly. And so people start understanding the pathway. The problem, I feel, in South Africa, we don't trust the pathway. We don't trust what's been said because nothing's really been done. And then they clean house, and then they bring in a new process and a new guy with new ideas, and all of a sudden you're not looked in at the Springbok level at all because the coach doesn't like you and the assistant coach doesn't like you, and the whole setup has changed. Whereas in New Zealand, and people hate it when we always refer to New Zealand, but the truth is they are the best at what they do. We can't deny it. They have faults, but they're still the best at what they do because they still keep their guys for longer than we do. So we forget about the rugby that they play. They keep the guys longer. And the thing is the guys trust the pathway there. Like the Mitre 10 Cup is essentially like the amount of guys I've watched come through that are just easy, just cruise into Super Rugby setup, and everyone just integrates so well through. It's because they trust the pathway, everyone's on the same page. And, we need to start looking at doing something, and it all comes with continuity and succession planning. And I just think we kind of got to stick with what we're doing for a while. So we have something that happens and we recoup the rewards of a 19-year-old youngster that's got talent now that we can run a whole season or a whole sort of rugby lifetime with him. So if we can spin it in a positive way that we cap the guys so we can retain them, then I would prefer it that way as opposed to rather the negative space.
Right. Tala, any final thoughts on this one from you before we move on to any other topics?
I think, first of all, maybe trying to also use our power in the world game to put pressure on World Rugby to maybe change eligibility sort of requirements as well might be almost a way of sort of disrupting it in a negative sense. Like, we do need to also just say, maybe sort of putting more weight on the representing your under 20 team and making the eligibility rules a bit longer if you represent in the under 20 World Cup, and saying, okay, you need to be of this country for 5 years, and maybe just incentivize sort of switching countries and all that sort of stuff. But that maybe might be a bit more of a old-fashioned take from my side. But I think, what everyone said is really, I think, good, and I think it's really pragmatic. At this point, the horse is bolted. We need to sort of think of solutions to get around that. And, working with sort of the private sector in order to make contracts as big as possible for our best players, working with the clubs overseas. SA Rugby, not necessarily renowned for innovative solutions, needs to sort of get going with this, because we're going to find ourselves in a situation where it's not even like we're not even going to be a good version of Brazil. We're going to be sort of like most of the African countries in a football sense, where all of the players play overseas, but they're not competitive in the international stage, and we're not reaping those rewards. So yeah, not to be sort of all doom and gloom. I don't think it's as big of a problem in the rugby sense, because obviously the competition's a bit smaller. But if we make the right decisions for the next few years in terms of working with the foreign leagues, working with the best players, we can actually have a great team, sort of, and a sustainable team, like going forward for the next like sort of 5 to 10 year period up until the next sort of rugby trend comes.
Right, thanks, Tyler, for those thoughts.
Can I jump in?
Come in, Sean.
I just want to quickly say something. I think we've also been in such a space where we have such a lot of talent and such a lot of players coming through. And we've unfortunately got into this mindset, like where we have a player and when he doesn't perform, we get rid of him because there's always going to be another guy coming through. If you look at our locks and our props, and so we almost feel like we take it for granted sometimes, and now we're going to have to start learning to manage players better and understand that sort of stuff. I don't know, maybe that's just something to think about, because we've had like thousands and thousands of players come through. I picked 2 15-man squads out of the 3 leagues overseas, and they weren't terrible. So it's just something we're going to have to start learning to maybe love the guys a little bit more.
Couch, final thoughts from you?
Brian, just lastly, I just want to say, I mean, the big thing is losing those fringe guys is always going to happen. I mean, the amount of rugby players we have, if you look at Craving Week, year in and year out, those guys have to go somewhere. So I've got no issues if those guys going to Orlock in France and that kind of thing. And if you get the odd guy who Clausen or whoever who comes through and he makes it, then so be it. Or even a Cocker who decided he was never going to do that. So I don't have a problem missing those guys and doing it. But as long as Sean says, if there was belief in the pipeline, but you can only fit so much into a pipe. So leave if you have to, because as I said, you have to go somewhere, and especially in the South African format, where are we going now with less contracted players? And that's just the reality. Things have to go that way. And personally, I don't want to debate it further on this topic, but I think we are going to move towards a place where you're going to have a franchise system that's privatized, and you have 4, whatever that is, and those guys just basically get bid on, and that the best of the best is playing here, and then the rest, obviously, we got to try and accommodate in our club structures, or they're going to go overseas.
Excellent. Sean, Tyler, any final thoughts from you guys on this? We're happy to move on.
Yeah, let's move. I'm happy from my side.
Excellent. Right, let's go on to the Stormers game, Tyler, and I'm going to stay with you here. It was 19-16 to the Crusaders in the dying moments of the game. The Stormers got a kickable penalty. A lot of people were baying for them to kick to the corner and go for the win. They elected to go for the posts and drew the game 19-all. Now, there's been lots of debate on Twitter about it as to whether or not that was the right decision. What did you make of it? Do you think Khaleesi was right in calling for the 3 points there?
So I didn't watch it live, and I think that you can lose sort of some of the context when you're watching live instead of sort of watching a bit of the highlights or a repeat. So that's the sort of my first sort of disclosure. But I do think, especially like how I saw it, first of all, maybe because there was still a bit of time sort of as the penalty was given for a restart to happen. But because of the bit of like a confusion and commotion about whether to kick or not, that sort of that opportunity got lost. So first of all, if people backed Khaleesi's call from the start and got the T in as soon as possible, there could have been some time to maybe try to go for the try. Then I think at least sort of I'm someone that would mostly sort of like, what do you call it, advocate for going for the try, trying to get the points and all that sort of stuff. But man, the Stormers have been desperate this season, really. And I think with you having like such a pretty average season, with losing to the Hug Warriors, losing to the Brumbies at home, like 2 points against the Crusaders in that context actually is so much more sort of a victory than a loss. And I know it doesn't do too much for them in the log, but I mean, other South African teams have been so inconsistent. The Stormers are still well within it, even with a draw. So I think it's a matter of knowing that you must back sort of the captain when he makes a decision and following the call. And secondly, I do think it's the right decision, just because, you know, it's sort of like damned if you do, damned if you don't for Kolisi. And I feel sorry for a captain in that sort of situation. But I do tend to support his decision in that context.
Right, Couch, let me move on to you. I'm going to tell you, I was 100% behind Kolisi in that particular case. You know, if the Stormers were outside of the conference, if they were no hopers in the South African conference, or if they had to really start chasing points to have any chance in the South African conference, I'd have said it's an error. If anything, for me, Couch, I must tell you that I thought maybe earlier on in the game when they were taking penalties, maybe that was the time to kick for the corner. I was a bit disappointed perhaps with some of those. But I thought at that stage of the game, given the Crusaders' maul defence, I thought it was spot on the right decision.
Brent, I just think the interesting thing is actually that I think Kolisi did take the decision thinking that he was going to try and kick it over quickly and go for the restart. And that's actually the interesting part about it for me, is that, you know, was that the right decision? Taking the kick, taking the draw, and then having a kickoff. And now the Crusaders could get into a position of winning another penalty. Because, I mean, how are you going to try and get yourself upfield? You're going to go for the up and under, or you're going to try and go a few phases in your O22. So, you know, that could have been even more risky. Then rather, you know, kick for the corner, and at least you know that you're putting in an effort, and, you know, you miss it. But in that alternative one, you know, they've got a pretty decent chance. You know, it's a long distance effort. So that was just interesting for me, the thought process that he had there. But what I did like was that, you know, eventually he made his mind up, and he wasn't swayed by the guys around him who were like not quite sure, and the T guy not coming on. He just said, "Listen, boys, this is what we're doing," and he stuck to it even when he saw, okay, now the time is going to run out on him. So I appreciate that, and I've often felt that was an issue for him. He took too much advice around him, and he wasn't like, "Listen, this is my decision, and this is what I want." And then in terms of, obviously, you know, we'd all love to support the team that's, you know, got the winning culture, got that winning mentality. And again, I think I've said cricket quite a few times, but you say they talk about brave cricket, and everyone, that's the buzzword, and you'd like to see that in your team, you know, giving it a bash and trying to win the game. But as Tola said, you got to see this in context. You know, this is the world's best, for mine, the world's best club team or franchise team, and you're hosting them, and it's not really going that great for you at the moment. You've scored one try in the other 75 minutes, so the odds aren't great, Brent, if we look at that kind of angle. But I'd say I think it was the right call there in terms of bank the 2 points. Obviously, you get some fans who are disappointed, and eventually in a different space, you'd like to see a South African team, you know, backing themselves. And again, I say this is the one thing you can practice. The Brumbies have shown it. If you really got that nailed down, you should be kicking to the corner and scoring 9 times out of 10, and then it's a good go-to option. But this is the Crusaders, and you bank the points you can get.
Yeah, I see you leading to a future show probably by saying they're the best club or franchise side, and you want to have the old Leinster Saracens debate that we had on Twitter as well. But we'll do that another time. Let's go over to Sean for his thoughts on this one. Sean, were you supportive of the decision?
Absolutely. I'm 100%. There's a number of reasons. I think everyone's talking as if the line-out drive and try was a dead certain. It's not. You're up against the Crusaders, who defensively, I don't know for sure, but I'm telling you now, they're in the top 2 of best defensive sides, plus more defense. Plus, don't forget that they're exceptionally good at the line-out and stealing at the line-out. So if they contested, that would have caused issues. If they didn't contest, I reckon they would have caused issues. So I think things were definitely in their favor if the Stormers went for the corner. But regardless of that, take the draw, and whatever the captain says you do. Like that was the most upsetting part for me. Is the captain, he's made a call, and to have guys chirping, to have the management also not getting as involved as they should. And then a couple of words afterwards, I wasn't happy with that. Everyone wants more sort of captaincy and leadership from Kolisi. He does it, and the Oaks push back. It's not acceptable for me. But I think it's bang on the right call in the context of the game. You know, the chances of kicking that over were much better than the chance of scoring the try. Do you want to walk away with nothing or a draw? It sucks, and there's always a could have, should have, would have. But this was definitely the percentage shot, and there's still time for the Stormers to make the knockouts. And I'm telling you now, those points are going to be valuable at the end of the season.
That's for sure. So, yeah, we seem to be pretty much in agreement that it was the right call there, perhaps Couch leaning towards the corner a little bit. Sean, let's stay on you, though. Let's talk about something else that happened in that game. That was a late call that there was a Crusaders forward pass, which has been debated endlessly on Twitter, with both sides saying that it was an absolute obvious decision. Either the TMO made obviously the correct call or the incorrect call. I did see your tweet on that, and that sparked quite a bit of debate as well. Where are you on this one?
So I think there's two ways of looking at it. If you feel that the ball left his hand going forward and it was a forward pass, then that's kind of the end of the discussion. Like, that's the way you see it. If you feel that the ball left his hand backwards and then went forward, then that's when I get, like, I want to understand people's processes, but I also want them to understand, like, the truth of the matter. Like, all passes go forward. If you're running forward and you're passing 9 times out of 10, the ball is going to go forward. So you can't, that argument's a non-argument for me. Personally, I thought the ball left, I thought it was a good pass. I think, like, if it was flat, maybe. I don't think it was forward. I think, the fact that Sevu Reece is reaching for the ball isn't really an argument either, because he might have been further back. So it doesn't, I've seen guys reach for the ball when the ball was comfortably backwards. It's just a positioning space. But, that's just the thing. I thought it was a harsh call. I thought, in terms of the conversation, it needed to be clear and obvious, if I'm understanding correctly. And to me, that wasn't a clear and obvious forward pass. I think there was a little bit of doubt there, but you're right though. You're either saying it's forward, or you're saying it's not forward, and it seems pretty 50-50 across all the couch critics on the Twitter sphere.
Yeah, and I want to bring Tyler in there, because Tyler, like you, I actually didn't watch this game live. I caught up. I had to take one of my kids to a party or something like that. So it was one of those games. I was also low on points. I'm a bit of a betting man, and I was low on points. And the best way to watch it low on points is to fast forward, because then you just watch that clock ticking and you hope there's no points. So that's what I was doing in that particular game. So that also means I didn't see it in context. In fact, I fast forwarded that through it so quickly. I didn't actually go back to it at the time. The first I saw it was actually Judge was Sean's tweet that he did where you could see it going. For me, I'm amazed. I was honestly amazed that that wasn't blown in real time, because irrespective of whether the hands went back or not, I was really, really surprised that wasn't blown as a forward. And once again, I haven't seen it in context, and that could be true. And I'm guessing you're in the same position, in that you've probably seen a replay, but weren't watching the game. Have you got a view on it?
Yeah. So that's also sort of where I'm coming from. Like, I sort of saw it on like Twitter later, and I was just like, well, that looks forward, but I totally fully get what Sean was saying. Like, and I understand sort of the physics behind it, like sort of momentum and putting it forward. And if you look at the hand positioning, okay, so the first thing is that if the on-field, I think these are one of those decisions where most times it should be left, when it's like a borderline call, it should be left to the on-field referees and assistant refs to make that call. They're the ones that can sort of better gauge sort of the hand positioning and everything, because cameras can, I won't say cameras can lie, but like, sort of the angling of the cameras and all that sort of stuff can make this thing a lot more confusing than it should be. So once it then goes upstairs, like, I think the TMO is correct in saying it wasn't clear and obvious. And I think that's sort of the criteria that you have in trying to overturn a decision. So if the ref and the assistant ref do feel like the hands were backward, and if you look at it, I don't think the hands were going forward in the passing motion. So it's just one of those situations where, and there's been many, I think every year or so we have a situation like this where a pass looks horribly forward, but it's more because of people running at 20-30 k's an hour, and that's sort of what's going to happen there. So yeah, I think it was sort of the right decision made by the TMO at the end, but you do sort of question, because I think referees, as much as they can say they're looking at the hand positioning, I personally believe a lot of them just look at where the pass ends up. So that's my question of being like, how did they sort of, if they looked at the hand positioning, they were then fully correct, and they're much better than I think that they are. But I think human nature would make you look at where the pass ends up, and sort of make a decision from that basis most times.
Yeah, Tyler, I'm in agreement with you there, and that's why I was so surprised that in real time it wasn't called a forward, because I can't see that the ref would really be able to judge on the hands at that point. I can understand maybe, and that's why I was sort of having some debates on Twitter, and I was kind of agreeing in the sense with people, maybe the TMO got it wrong when he had a chance to view the hands and stuff. But as I say, very surprised the ref didn't blow it. Let's bring Couch in there for his views on this one.
Brent, the only review I want is Brent Graham saying he's a bit of a betting man. That's like the biggest understatement I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's true.
You'll know from your other show that I've taken quite a bit of stick for taking out hometown guys. So I can't really give Marius Jonker the stick here on this one because he's a fellow Richards Bay boy. So I won't put the boot in here, but I must say I was surprised. Like it's a 50-50. It's if the guys on field called it, I would have understood that there wasn't evidence to overturn it. But for him to call it back was a heck of a surprise. You know, I felt live. Okay, that could have been forward, and then you looked at it. But I think the thing is there, it's almost the easiest thing to judge is the guy passes on the halfway line, he catches it on the 10-yard line, and everyone's like, okay, that's forward. You know, it's easy. You can dot it down and you can see it. But as Sean has said, and as that video and stuff we've seen lately has shown on social media, you know, you've got the whole momentum thing. And I think the problem with that pass was that it wasn't your normal spin pass, and it almost did a little bit of a float. So it started slightly backwards out of the hand for me, and then there was like this little dip flow towards the Stormers line, and that made it look to, you know, Sivaris had to reach out for it. And usually if you get that beautiful, you know, spin pass end of the end or side of a side, then it's going to look better, you know, so it doesn't stand out as much. So for me, I was surprised that old Mara pulled that one back there. I think I would have let it go. And for me as well, I think it's pretty much flat out of their hands, and I wouldn't have called it back, but it would have been interesting if it went the other way. I don't think you could also overrule it and say, no, definitely didn't leave the hand. But I think it's going to be something that they're going to have to clear up, because I mean, imagine us sitting here and talking about this in a semi-final of a final of a World Cup, then World Rugby is going to look a bit silly.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm just happy Sean Feldman's not on the panel for the World Cup, so I won't be hearing him saying check into the microphone there. Sean, before we move on from this one to the Bok 9 and 10, anything else from you? Any final words on this one?
Me, sorry, on this. Yeah, I think that's it. And I'm glad that you spoke about this style of pass, because that pass, that sort of rugby league pass he put in, definitely put a bit of an away swing on it, which absolutely influenced things. The ball does definitely change direction in the air, the way I see it, and agree with the camera angles comment too, Tyler. It definitely changes things up. I just don't think it was as clear cut as people make it out to be. But it's done. The referee made the final call, and the Stormers got points out of the game.
Right, thanks, guys. I think some good chat on that one. Let's move on to the final topic of the evening. And Tyler, as the first timer that debutant on the show, I'm going to let you start off here. Let's talk about the number 9 jersey. Basically, we can look at it two ways, in terms of who do you think is going to be selected in the number 9 jersey, or who would you like to be selected? And feel free to comment on any other, squad members or any bolters that you feel should be given a run, maybe in the Rugby Championships.
Yeah. I think, first of all, at least my philosophy with the Springboks this year is keep it as similar as possible to last year. Try to build. We might not be fully ready for winning the Rugby World Cup this year, in my opinion. I think we're still a little bit sort of short of experience. We still need to get combinations going. But if all goes well, by 2021, when the Lions come here, we're going, like most people have more than 50 caps. Combinations will be playing with each other about 30, 40 times. Then we'll be fully at peak. So with most positions, at least for first choice, my thing is there any reason why I would sort of put someone else in other than the incumbent? And for number 9 and for number 10, I think Faf de Klerk has sort of done enough. He's obviously played well last year. He's one of the best players up in England in this season. We all know Faf's strengths and we all know Faf's weaknesses. I think Rassie has exploited his strengths to the fullest extent in terms of, making him that terrier in defense, making him snappy, like off the base of the rack. His passing game and his kicking game has improved. I must give him that, but his passing game is still a bit dodgy. But there isn't really too many better options. So I would still, I think, and I don't think there's too much dissenting voices about this, but I'll still go Faf de Klerk as the first choice 9. In terms of second and third choice, I think Cobus Reinach is probably doing enough to be in the mix and be a second choice. I would personally go for one of the local scrum offs as the third choice for the purpose of gaining experience more than anything. So I would probably go for someone like Emrys Papier, because I think his game is sort of the one that's sort of closest to international standard at this moment. I think Herschel Yankees could do with another season in the Currie Cup. I think that would serve him well. Even Van Zyl, as a Bulls fan, I'm very much exasperated by him right now. I sort of see what the coaches see in him, but I personally don't think he's someone that should be in the box squad right now. So that would be sort of my combination of Faf de Klerk, Cobus Reinach on the bench, and a good impact option, coming in with the pace, and also not sort of the best in terms of the basics of the game. I think he's maybe almost equal with Faf de Klerk in terms of the basics, but he's also a Faf de Klerk type player, so he can sort of be plugged in. He can play that sort of sweeper role that Faf plays, and sort of that shooting up from the defensive line as well. And then someone like Emrys Papier, I think, is a great bench option. So if something should happen to one of our first two choices, throwing in Papier in the last 20-15 minutes with his quick passing and his good running game, I think would serve as well.
Excellent. Thanks for that, then, Todd. I'm going to go over to Catch just quickly to welcome the guys to the live chat. Chris, Andre, and Shane. Shane is from Dublin, so he started a bit of a World Cup conversation there in the live chat. And definitely, Catch, before you get into your choices, I mean, we can't wait for the World Cup, and we're going to have lots of shows talking about the groups and all of that, and of course from betting angle as well.
No, definitely, Brent. That's going to be great fun, and I think I'm going to need to get the strepsils handy to make sure the voice holds it for the entire tournament. It's going to be going great guns, I think.
Right, and what about the 9 jersey then?
Yes, definitely. Tala's spot on there. We said it previously when we've talked about it. You can't really bring too many fresh faces in from outside the group. You're pretty much stuck with the core, but obviously, if you've got one bolter, you need to bring in, and I think Reinach is that guy. I mean, obviously, we've seen the issue that someone like Francois Hilgaard has been on fire that side, and he comes back, and it's not the same playing international rugby to playing club rugby over there. And it's one thing shining and putting in 80-meter runs, and that is not what a scrum off is there for. Primarily, he's got to hit the rucks and get that ball out as quickly as possible to fly off of a flat, fast pass. So, I mean, again, Reinach is probably not the best at that, but he could be a superb bench scrum off, to come in that last 10-15 minutes, especially if you're down and you need someone to change things up. So I've always liked Reinach. I wouldn't mind him getting a run in the rugby championships, maybe with either Herschel Yankees or Papier, and see what they got. And I think Faf he's penned in as the number 9, so you shouldn't need to give him too much time. Him and Pollard are a good combination. So now I'm definitely starting with Faf there, and then I'll probably stick with Papier as well as the backup. I think Tala's got a good point. I think he's pretty much the closest we've got to being ready to be an international from the rest of the lot, and now I wouldn't go close to Ivan van Zyl.
Okay, so very much linked up with what Tyler said there. Just Chris saying in the live chat that Faf is playing amazing for Sale, and he likes him as a choice. And then welcome to Vin Naidu, one of our regulars on the Handicap Show. Vin, good to have you watching on the live chat as well. Sean, let's go over to you now for your thoughts on the number 9.
Yeah, I'm going to rock the boat a little. So I've issues with Faf in terms of he's rather erratic. His pass is not great. His kicking has got better, but I feel I think if we're going to take a squad of 9s, we need to take 9s that we are willing to play. And unfortunately, World Cups and squads in the past and very recent past, we've been picking a whole bunch of 9s that are inexperienced, and the guys have got no one to turn around and look at for help. And now the guys are starting to do that to Faf de Klerk. And he is playing well for Sale in the Premiership. There's no doubt about it. But the issue that I have is the game. It seems that we're we've put together is centered around Faf, where he has that leadership, that 10 role. And I don't think that suits Handré Pollard. I think Handré Pollard is your 10 that's going to dictate and move the game around, where I feel when Faf's there, he tries to do that. And that's where I think the balance is a little bit wrong. There's no doubt about Faf and his work ethic and everything, but I just feel he makes too many errors, and I feel his errors hurt us a lot. And often when he comes back to make a tackle, very often it's due to an error of his part. And I'm just maybe like, I've got to give him his due. He's got better. His kicking has got a little bit better. I think Reinach's got a better kick. I think Reinach makes a couple of good reads. It's a tough one. I think Faf is going, and he's on 9. I think it's too soon to bring in other people now. I love the conversation about talking about the Lions and talking about the next World Cup, because then we start planning and putting stuff in place. But the truth is we want to be competitive at the World Cup. I just want to make sure that the 3 9s that we take, that we're willing to play those 3 9s. Are we going to take a 9 that's going to carry bags and not get involved? Or we're going to land up in trouble where we need 20 minutes out of him. I want to make sure when the guy comes on the field, we're like, cool, he's got it, And that comes with experience, and our 9s are lacking experience at the moment. So I feel that Reinach has got a big look in because of his form and because of the fact that he's captain, he's got a little bit more of a level head. I think Faf will be there. I wouldn't mind. Papier had a decent game this weekend, and he's been a little bit erratic, but he's definitely got the class. And I think Nick Groom was in with a little bit of a shot, and he's kind of dropped off a little bit. But it's tough. I think it's pretty much set on those 3 that we've discussed with Reinach, Faf, and Papier possibly.
Just interesting on that scrum half booth. I was thinking about it while we were talking about the exodus of overseas players. Amazing how many of our players actually go over there and really do improve. And I'm thinking now in particular like a Reinach, for example. I mean, he was pretty erratic when he played here. Going a bit further back, think of a Ruan Pienaar. I mean, Pienaar was sort of used to take a lot of criticism here. And then he goes and he plays like in Ireland, and he suddenly becomes almost, in some people's eyes, a world beater. So it could be that experience the guys are getting over there in the north is actually going to stand us in good stead in the World Cup.
100%. If you look at James Hall, he's playing for Oyonnax at the moment, or is soon to be leaving there. World-class player, also done exceptionally well, youngster. He's been playing in the Pro D2 after Oyonnax got relegated. He will make a move into the top 14 soonish. The Sharks, I'm such a big fan, and the Sharks backup 9 behind Schröder. Hit a miss. Anyway,
Cameron Wright.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't believe he's pretty handy. But remember when Groom and Reinach were at Saints last season, Groom was keeping Reinach off field. So it's quite interesting. I feel our players are do have more time to relax and focus on what they need to focus over there, and actually get to work on their errors and fixing their game. I think is probably they kind of polish their game a little bit better. So yeah, I would love to see Hoagie in the mix. I really would, because I think balancing your 9s, where your 9s have someone to look to, and if he ever came on, he would do a perfect job. He could fulfill that Bobby Skinstad role, or senior player, the Schalk Brits role in the squad for the backs as well. I just feel there's so many guys that are trying to find themselves, and as soon as we settle that, we'll be able to open up a little bit.
So just to let Tyler know, Tyler, I haven't forgotten about you, but I have just muted you there out for a little bit because it was picking up some sound in the background. But I'm going to come to you last on the 10s. I'm going to start with Sean while we're talking to you, Sean. The 10 jersey, Pollard, the incumbent, you got to fancy him. But is Yankees or anyone else going to challenge him?
I think Pollard, Yankees are our 2 10s. I think there's no doubt about it. They both on form. They're both pretty handy. They've both got plenty caps. They almost seem to dovetail quite well with each other, the way they're playing. I think if they're both hitting a little bit of form, which Pollard is now, Yankees is in a bit of form, I think we're in a good space. I still think Elton Yankees is the best attacking 10 we have, without a doubt. I think all 10s are really good attacking. I think Elton Yankees is head and shoulders above everyone going forward with ball in hand. I think he's incredible. And I think Pollard's starting to get a little bit on there now too. And I think we're only taking 2 10s to the World Cup, and then we'll take someone like Willems 15 to 10 cover, if I'm not mistaken. Willems is not 10 Springbok 10 material like right now for me. I feel he carries a bit much, so I think 15 would be a good space for him to settle, and they'll integrate him slowly but surely. I don't doubt his talent. Right now, I don't think 10 for him for the Springboks is the answer now. I want him in the squad, and I want him to be there. So Pollard and Yankees definite for me.
Right, let's go to you, Couch, number 10 jersey.
Yes, I'm with the judge on that one. You can't go past Pollard and Yankees. And the good thing is, I mean, this past weekend as well, they both had great games. So there's definitely some good form there. And I just feel actually Elton is close to a Quade Cooper kind of flyer for me. You know, he's very creative and he's a good attacker, but he's also a little bit, you know, erratic at times, and you can get under his skin a bit, and that's why, as you said, they actually dovetail quite well. I told you before the show is I quite like Elton as your backup, knowing that if you are behind, you're chasing the game, then Elton is a good option. But at the same time, you know, it's not as the judge said there with having an inexperienced guy. You know, he's still a Super Rugby final player. You know, he's got that experience, so you can count on him. But he's just got that little bit more X factor. But I do sometimes worry when he wants to try and run the ball out of his own 22 and try a little dinky chip or a quick tap and cross kick when the cross kick isn't on. So for me, there Pollard is just slightly better at decision making, knowing when it's on, and he's also personally I think he's got a bit of a better boot, you know, kicking out of hand. But I must say the good thing about Elton is his goal kicking is really on, and that's also a good thing. And then I also agree. I think we'll probably go with either Cohen Bosch or Damian Willems. I think Rassie will go with Damian Willems as the backup, but I don't see either of them being ready to start any game in the World Cup in 10, and you definitely don't want them in the knockout phases, even coming off the bench really and playing in that pivot position. So we do have a little bit of an issue, I think, behind those two, but it's probably going to be Willems to cover, and then obviously it's going to be good for the future. But I mean, there's still a lot that can happen in that position over time. I mean, I really like a Cohen Bosch getting exposure there over the long term. But no, I think we're in pretty good hands with Polly and Elton at the moment.
Right, Tyler, let's give you the final word then on the number 10s. You echoing what the guys are saying? Have you got any different views on this?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement, and I think most of the country, from seeing people's squads, on agreement about Pollard and Yankees. I think Handré Pollard is getting close to that mark of being like one of the best, or sort of very close to one saying he's getting close to being the best fly in the world. And he's not maybe there by Sexton and all those people, but like he's pretty comparable to someone like Owen Farrell, for example. And he's a great game manager and maybe a good foil for Faf de Klerk, and sort of the points that Sean was making when Faf can get super erratic if he doesn't have a good start. The third 10 option is the worry, because the worst case scenario of we have a quarterfinal against Ireland and someone gets injured in the morning, you know, you don't want to throw in Damon Willems. You don't necessarily want to throw in Cohen Bosch. Who are your other options then? And I think that's sort of the worry about Willems not playing really any 10 at the moment. And maybe that would make you lean towards taking Cohen Bosch. But then the second point is sort of bench makeup as well. So if you play Yankees, he only covers 10 and maybe a little bit of 12. Or maybe you move Pollard to 12, and then you have to make sure then your second bench option, probably someone like Colby, maybe Jesse Creel if he's not starting at 13. And we're not sort of covering our bases. We don't have like the Bowden Barrett in 2015 or what Damian McKenzie would have been if he was fit, situation where we have a 10 that can cover 15 or someone that can cover multiple spots that can play the 10 jersey. And I think that's my concern. Ideally, someone like Damian Willems would be that person and he would be on our bench. But like the other two guys have said, you don't necessarily want to have Damian Willems as your substitute fly-off this year at the moment. So then we have to basically sacrifice a bit of flexibility on our bench to put someone like Elton Yankees on the bench, and then sort of losing that flexibility in terms of 15 or losing it in our centers or wherever we're going to lose. And then lastly, obviously the sort of the twin pivot thing of having Yankees and Pollard on the field at the same time. It worked really well for us in Wellington. So that's not necessarily something if I was coach, I would do that a lot more. I think Andre Pollard could have easily been one of the best 12s in the world if we played him there from the start. But yeah, I think that's something that we can pursue in the last 15 minutes of the game if we're chasing it. Have Yankees at 10, have Pollard at 12, and spreading the wings, the ball wide to our wings.
Excellent, Tyler. Thanks for those thoughts, guys. Before we close the show, we're up to an hour and a pretty good timing, I would say. But Sean, anything else from your side?
No, I'm all good. I'm liking our Springboks setup at the moment. Hopefully it glues together nicely.
Yeah, I must say, Couch, I find myself a little bit torn. We're having a bit of a discussion in the live chat about, who's going to win the World Cup. And as you know, I'm very much favouring the Northern Hemisphere. But then when I hear you guys talking about the Springbok team, and I can hear the sort of confidence and excitement in your voices, I start thinking to myself, no, surely, but maybe I mustn't back a Northern Hemisphere team to win. But any final views from you, Couch?
No, Brent, I think we all obviously love the Springboks and have an interest in the Springboks. But I mean, I don't think we're in a space that we're going to be competing for the trophy. We just got to try and make do and do as best we can. And then definitely next week, I think could get quite interesting when we get onto the loose forwards. I think we could see quite a difference of opinion there, especially on our squad members. So that should be good fun.
Certainly should. And Tyler, let me just thank you first of all for making your debut on the show. And we look forward to seeing your face sometime in the future.
Big pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate the chat. I think it was really constructive. I think it was not sort of controversial because we were all sort of in sync with each other. Yeah, I think I said it at the start. We could either really be like quarterfinal exit or could go all the way. And I think it's actually maybe the best part for South Africa. We don't sort of overhype ourselves. I think it's the same with the Proteas right now. No one's too overconfident, so it won't hurt as much, hopefully, if we get knocked out. But, at least there's a little bit of hope. So maybe that's actually better as we know how crazy Twitter can get with our rugby teams. I think maybe it's better that we have our expectations very much as low as possible right now.
That's it. I think I saw a tweet today. I think is it Ben Kobinski, Follow the Bounce. He said something about South African people are so nice and friendly and helpful, basically the opposite of Twitter. You've really got to be careful what you believe in Twitter there as well. But Tyler, thanks very much. Great having you on the show. Sean, thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of the week and look forward to your tweets.
Excellent. Thank you, gents. Have a great one.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. And I'll see you Thursday night, Couch. And to those of you watching the show for the first time, if you do enjoy the betting angle, then join us 9 o'clock on Thursday night for the handicap rugby chat that matters. Couch, I'll see you then, no doubt.
Cheers, definitely. We're going to try and make some money this week, eh?
Excellent. Hey, I made last week. Don't worry about that. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks also to the guys who came in on the live chat. Always good to have your contributions. And we look forward to next week's show. No doubt some more hot topics will pop up during the week on Twitter. Thanks, everyone, for watching. If you are watching for the first time, please go below the video and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our shows. And we'll see you next week.